The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. We do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. This week, we learned from Nitin Dua. Nitin is a strategy director at Mojo Supermarket. An economics and finance graduate from the University of Virginia, Nitin found himself a bit conflicted as he broke into financial tech after receiving his master's degree in commerce. So how does a man with a master's degree in commerce from the University of Virginia break into strategy at Fallon, then become strategy director at the award-winning creative shop Mojo Supermarket, where his recent campaign for the Truth Initiative just won a grand Effie, one of the most challenging awards and most sought-after strategy accolades? How does this all happen? Well, I'll let you listen to find out. I can't give it all away in this intro, but here's what I can tell you. Nitin has a great mind and perspective, which helps when you want to break into strategy. You will be able to tell from our conversation that he is conscientious. You can also tell that he cares about helping aspiring advertisers as he plans to break into academia at some point in his career. We discuss Mojo Supermarket, Fallon, portfolio schools, higher education, taking on internships strategically, and break-in options and advice just for you. And last thing, Nitin listed out hand-picked resources to help aspiring advertisers break in to advertising. You can find those exclusively on our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word, at Breaking and Entering Pod. Go there. It's like a library of free resources. Now on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I am your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have Nitin Dua. Nitin Dua, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Gino. I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I told you before this, I had to leave my office a little bit early today. I was a little irritable. I don't think I ate enough food, or maybe I drank too much coffee. So I went home early today, at 4 o'clock, and now I'm refreshed. And
that's great. I mean, you got to be refreshed. No reason to go if you're feeling irritable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you go around not feeling irritable?
I have to try to follow my routine as closely as possible. I'm an early riser. I got to wake up at 5:30 every morning, hit the gym, drink a lot of water, drink my coffee. And if I don't get that, I can get definitely pretty irritable.
It happens. And I'm the same way. I'm an early riser as well. And routine for me is everything, but sometimes, and this is not a therapy session, we're going to talk about breaking entering. I just feel like sometimes when you're so strict with I'm so strict with my routine, I get stressed out if I need to learn to go with the flow.
Yeah. I mean, I also intermittent fast. And so I have a block on my calendar at noon. I'm like, let me just quickly get a bite in because I haven't eaten in 16 hours. And then if I don't get it, I can definitely be even more irritable. And so I need to definitely let go of that just a little bit, have a little bit of flexibility, because I don't want to take that out on other people.
Oh, yeah. And it happens. And it happens to all of us. So it's a good little lesson right there. But we're here to talk about you. We're here to talk about Mojo Supermarket because that's where you work. Yep. We're here to talk about what does it mean to be a strategy director, because you're a strategy director at Mojo Supermarket. Let's do it. Tell us about it. Tell us about you.
Yeah, man. I'll go way back quickly because I didn't know I'd be in this industry. I didn't even know it existed when I was in college, and I was a finance major, a financial economics major. I thought I was going to be an investment banker. And when I started going on interviews, I was like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel right. I kind of made a mistake. I ended up taking a job in financial software for a little bit, the small fintech company, which was great. But before starting that job, I accidentally discovered advertising. And I realized that was a much more interesting thing to do. It was something that combined kind of my my creative brain meets the business brain. And I thought, I want to like pursue this. I took my job, but I kind of like really wanted to pursue this new thing. And I was reading all the books. I was trying to break in. I was actually having a really hard time with it.
How did you wait? So you were a finance investment banker. You're bound to make a bunch of money in your life and be super busy. How did you remind me again how you found out about advertising?
Yeah. So before graduating, I got a job in November of, so I did this thing. I went to school at UVA. I did 5 years and I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in finance. Mm-hmm. Between like November of 2012 and June of 2013, when I was supposed to start a finance job, I went and studied abroad. And in this study abroad, we had this really great mix of classroom learning and like real life industry learning. And I got to visit an ad agency abroad. They gave us this little assignment to work on where it was, 30-minute sprint on, I think it was Mountain Dew. I don't remember the brand, but I remember just having so much fun with it that I thought, like, I wonder if I can do this thing.
Why were you going to an ad agency? Was the class just like an elective, like abroad?
It was so it was it was a little bit of our professor had a connection to it, so they were like filling up the curriculum. But like it wasn't literally only a master's in finance. It was a master's in business, and I concentrated in finance. And so they kind of had this thing where like you got the full rounded business education where we did management, marketing, data systems, coding, like, sort of this broad mix of things. And then you concentrated for one full semester. And then it kind of culminated in this study abroad that did everything.
That sounds like a great program.
It was good.
Why'd you go into the master's program? So it was like a 4+1, you got your master's.
Yeah. That was exactly it.
I'm trying to think 2013, 2014. What was the rationale behind the master's other than that it was a convenient program and it sounded nice? Because it does sound nice.
Yeah, it was a couple of things. So one, when I was finishing up undergrad, I just felt like I needed a little bit more time, and I had the time to sort of grow and admittedly had the financial flexibility to be able to do it.
That's the thing.
Yeah, but the second thing kind of was like I just thought that my education was incomplete. And so at the time it was all economics and finance. And this also goes back to why I want to be a professor, because my econ education was really theory based, and it set you up if you wanted to like pursue a PhD in economics. Like you learned a lot of theory, but I didn't feel like I had the practical knowledge to start working.
So you went and you thought the MBA would would give you more rather than going to work. You went to do more school. Doesn't that seem kind of counterintuitive?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It was probably a little bit of immaturity too, to be honest. Like
that's a great idea though. I mean, like anytime you can further, especially if you have the financial flexibility, you don't have the stress.
Yeah.
And you have the time. I always say like now talking about portfolio school and like master's programs, MBAs, like, hey, if you have the time and the money and you want the regimen, by all means, it's the best way to break in nowadays. Like it's the easiest. It's not the easiest, but it's like a for sure way to do it if you're dedicated and you have the time and the money.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, because when I had this finance job and I started in June or July of 2013, I was trying to break in the ad industry at the same time, and for literally a year, I couldn't figure it out. And part of it was on me, like I didn't know the right things to do. I didn't know the right people. I didn't know how to set up my resume. I wasn't the best at networking. And so I did go back to Brand Center. I spent 2 years there from 2014 to 2016 because I just needed that extra sort of push and that extra access that I couldn't get on my own.
So when you graduated, that you got the taste of the ad sprint at your abroad. Where abroad were you?
We were in Shanghai.
Shanghai. What was the agency that you did this?
White & Kennedy in Shanghai. It's cool.
Nice. So it makes sense. You caught the itch.
Yeah, exactly.
Had a great company. I don't know about Shanghai as much as I do about Portland.
Right.
but I'm sure they're fantastic as well. You caught the bug there, but you still took your finance job after you had that 4+1 master's program, study abroad, cool thing. You took a finance job, financial tech, right?
Yeah, it was a company that had a software that could help banks value their loan portfolios. And so I was kind of like the service that we sold was software plus specialists. So I was a financial specialist who understood loan banking and market and loan banking and portfolio management. So I could use the software to sort of like aid in valuation, accounting, and things like that. It was this really niche, complicated thing that
I have no clue what that means, but it sounds awesome.
it was okay. It's interesting. Like the purpose of the company was eventually to digitize everything I did. But it was a long time horizon. Like they had a 10-year plan to do it. So I had a lot of time to be able to grow into this thing. And if I wanted to become a manager, I could, but I kind of just felt like that job was not for me. So I decided to take this sort of advertising itch that you're talking about and make it my full-time long-term thing.
Who are you telling? Like, you got your MBA, right?
It wasn't an MBA. It was a MS. Yeah.
You got a master's and you were finance, economics, all these years of undergrad. Who are you telling and how did they react? And you're like, well, this is all great and all. I'm probably going to get paid. I'm probably getting paid well, but I want to make ads.
Yeah.
How did that go over with the people you know and love?
Yeah, I remember the conversation with my mom like it was yesterday. It was really interesting because she definitely was baffled. It was definitely not a career path that she understood or knew about. And it was one of those things where I already had defied them by not being doctor, lawyer, engineer. That was the household conversation.
Yeah.
And
they weren't happy with the masters you got. Yeah.
No, and it was more just it was diving into such an unknown for them that they knew, part of, I'm sure what their fear was that they didn't know how to help me with that. They didn't know anyone in this industry. They knew people in finance and accounting. They could connect me with them if I needed some help. My mom herself was an accountant. My dad himself ran his own business. So like they kind of understood different parts of it, but they didn't know what this creative advertising world was. And of course they were worried about it.
I would be.
Yeah, and I don't have kids. I don't know what that's like. I'm sure they're.
I would not let my kids study advertising. No, just kidding.
It's funny. My wife is a pediatric dentist, and she's constantly like, "Our kids are going to be dentists." I'm like, "Yeah, this is a good path."
Does she like it?
Yeah, she likes it. She works with kids all day, and it's really nice for her to. She had this thing where when she was deciding if she wanted to specialize or not, she was like, kids are allowed to be afraid of the dentist and adults aren't. And I have so many adults that come in and I can't deal with how whiny they are. And I was like, okay, that's kind of makes a lot of sense. And plus the field was growing. So she was like, I want to jump in on it.
Does she want to start a entering dentistry podcast, breaking teeth podcast?
I think the path is a little more linear and clear than ours is.
Isn't that nice though? Sometimes don't you get envious of? Yeah, obviously it's probably a lot harder, right?
I mean, I couldn't do it. I don't have the skill set, the patience, the ability to think the way she does. It's way different. It's a way different way to use your brain.
I'm jealous. Sometimes with like that clear linear path, like, yes, it's very hard. I get that, but I do get envious of people that like, well, you get this certain amount of schooling. I don't know. I don't even want to be quoted on this, but you like certifications or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you like the law, like the bar, you pass the bar, you have the one test and you can show that you have the skills and you can do this with the one test. You pass it and you're good.
There are these like literal steps, like I'm studying for this from this time frame to this. If I pass, I'm able to move here. And then literally like the jobs just line up. And it is so much cleaner and clearer than anything we ever have to deal with.
And I guess you found out, the closest thing for us is you develop a portfolio, right? Or a body of work, or you create a podcast, or I don't even know. Like it's still not one size, but really your portfolio, if you want to be a creative or a strategist, is kind of like that that benchmark piece in
Yeah,
your.
I do think there are some things that at least I try to share with every student I talk to that I feel are the closest thing we have to check boxes. For
Mhm.
example, I tell them like 70% of it is networking,
Yeah.
especially in the non-creative side of things. Like every strategist I talk to, I'm like, I used to do this before leaving Brand Center. I would send anywhere from 10 to 30 emails to recruiters and strategists a week to try to get in front of people. My hit rate was low, but to me it became a numbers game.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it worked for me.
What are the other check boxes? So you said 70% networking in your brain.
Yeah.
The other 30% is your experience and examples.
Yeah. The other like 15 to 25%, and there might be little things I'm forgetting, but is sort of how do you take your combination of work, life, volunteer experience and kind of frame yourself up
Yeah, the
in a way.
narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the combination of like the showing your qualifications, which is a resume and or a portfolio, and then once you get your foot in the door, it's the interview.
Yeah.
And it's not literally check boxes, but if you can really focus on and have some perseverance around those two things, I think you just really increase your odds of success.
I agree. Now, there are some schools of thought that might disagree. My old boss at a portfolio school would say if you're a creative, so an art director or copywriter, he would bump the percentage on your work would be more so than networking, because he would always say your portfolio gets you the job and you go with it.
Yeah, and
Marketing and positioning for the school that he was running. But if your work's good too, like especially for the creative, like we're talking creatives right now,
yeah.
like you kind of want a decent body of work, whether that's awards or it's just good spec work that speaks to what the client needs are at the time and they're hiring. That's another school of thought too.
I think it might be closer to 50-50 maybe for a creative. But the thing I have a hard time wrapping my head around is like, how do you get that in front of people? Like I talk to creatives too, not as often as I talk to strategists who want to break in, and I'll like their work, but sometimes they get it in front of me, who's the wrong person, because Mojo's tiny and we have a philosophy where a lot of our creatives are pretty senior level. Like we don't actually have a single junior level team.
Some agencies are like that, the smaller ones that are really nimble, or newer or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think networking is still a significant part of it. Yeah, there are probably people looking at the portfolio schools, clicking through, scrolling, and you might be able to break in through that. But Brand Center itself has 60 creatives that are all competing, and so when you have to scroll through, you're not scrolling through 60 portfolios. There is possibly an association some recruiter has with, I've heard of these 5 people because I talked to a professor or I talked to somebody who knows somebody. That might help narrow it down, but really it's easier if you get your portfolio in front of them and take away the legwork of for them to like sift through all of that.
I'll tell you what, you brought up a good point right there that I never really think about, or I do, but I never brought it up on the podcast. I'm going straight to professors. When I'm looking for somebody for a job, I go to my old professors that I know and love. Kaylee Cantrell, I mean, I
Awesome.
talked with, she ran strategy for the longest time. I believe she just retired recently.
Yeah, she just retired, but she told us, I remember we were in her class and she said, how often professionals hit me up and ask, who do you recommend for this type of job? I mean, it happens all the time. I've done it myself where I reached out to Kaylee, or now Kevin Rothermel's there too. And I've reached out to both of them and said, who do you recommend? This is the type of person I need.
Yeah.
And it takes away so much legwork.
We don't have the time to go through even 20 to 30, unless you're a recruiter, that's your job. But
though, do they have the time to go through 20 a day? I don't know. Like,
I mean,
maybe
that's
around.
job. I would hope so.
I would hope so. The problem is flipped though, or the problem is different then, right? Like, how do you make yourself memorable in there? And that's where the work piece really, really, really matters. But even then, if you get to a recruiter, like you have a couple of layers after that, that's where the interview really matters. How you sell in what's in your portfolio really matters too. So it's not just framing it up on the site. It's like, how do you talk about it? Are you good at that? Do you understand how to really set yourself up for success? It's just a question that you have to think about.
And practice too.
Yeah. I
Like
agree.
a lot of the interview stuff is practice. If you're getting interviews, you're in a good spot.
100% agree.
But no, I like that, like getting close with professors and they like your work and you showed like that you work hard, because that's what I do and you've done it. That's a good point. So you went to VCU, back to your story, and then I want to talk about Mojo.
Yeah.
Because we flipped it. We're supposed to talk about advice later, but that's totally fine. I used to be very strict with my format of this podcast. Now I just go all over the place and people are very receptive of it. So you decided after your cool finance tech banking platform job that you needed to go to portfolio school because you weren't getting bites. And your family was like, okay, go ahead and do this. Maybe you're crazy.
Yeah.
Actually, don't do this. What did they say exactly?
My mom just didn't get it, and she said, "Look, like, you're paying for it." And I said, "Yeah, it's fine. I'll figure that piece of it out." Because I think part of it was a test of how much do you really care about this. But another part of it was just like, I think she wanted me to have some skin in the game.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, that was a tough conversation, but in hindsight, a very worthwhile one.
So you were telling her at this time, you're like, I've been trying to get out of my current job. It's not working. I'm going to VCU Brand Center. Why VCU Brand Center? What was the rationale for that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I felt like their strategy track was the most. It was the thing I wanted to do. In hindsight, I was looking at my finance degree and I was like looking in my closet at home. I remember this, and I was looking at I had a stack. I had a couple stacks of textbooks because I didn't sell them, and I wondered if I wanted to keep them. Anyway, I was looking at them and I was wondering what my favorite classes were. I was kind of like trying to decide, because I was deciding, they have 2 tracks there, creative brand management strategy. And I thought, which one do I align with? What path would I want to pursue? And I chose strategy because my favorite class was called behavioral economics. And it just made a lot of sense, because in an economics degree, you often, in order to do the work, have to assume things. Your teacher will say, in order to do these, calculate these problems.
Rational.
Yeah, you have to assume everyone's rational. And it was, and in that class, I remember the first day, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'll say it. And if you want, I need to cut it out, cut it. But the teacher comes in and says, all of your teachers have told you to assume everyone's rational. I'm here to tell you the economy is driven by fear and cocaine. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? And it just kind of jarred us. And I remember reading every book. I remember like loving every scientific paper I read about psychology and economic decision making. And it just made me go, okay, strategy is the right thing. And then it helped narrow down the places I could go, because really Brand Center had the best bet.
What is creative brand management? You said, so you're between creative brand management and strategy.
Yeah, creative brand management produces, usually the career path is either the client side, you become a brand marketer or brand manager, or you kind of go on the account side of things. That's usually what that path produces, because you get the education is closer to a traditional marketing MBA type of education, where you have a combination of like accounting, people skills, management, but it's more of a,
so VCU
how do you manage creative
that
things
as well? You're looking at. Interesting. I don't know if I would do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a different type of person, and actually, maybe 30% of that graduating class ends up becoming a strategist anyway. So it kind of depends on what you need and want to learn, and what you want to pursue.
I've heard great things about the strategy program, and it's 2 years and it's not cheap. I know that, but if you have the means to do it and you have the time, it is like I've said before, VCU, you also get the master's degree. So you have 2 master's degrees, right?
Yeah. And honestly, I just thought that like it would give me the access I wanted, like the access that I couldn't get. And it did.
What were the other options that you were looking at for?
Mostly it was keep trying to break in, or an MBA. And I just didn't want to do an MBA.
an MBA to get into a strategy role doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I've never interviewed anybody that's done that.
I've met
Maybe.
2 people in my career.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's maybe marketing master. There's IMC at Northwestern, I hear, is a good one too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think UT Austin might have a program like a master's, not an MBA, but something like it. You can
They have a master's and a PhD. I know a lot of your
Yeah.
professors, if you study undergrad advertising, which you didn't do, but I'm sure you know a lot of people. A lot of the times they'll have a PhD from Michigan State or UT Austin.
Yeah, and I remember looking at Austin too, but I just didn't feel like it was the right thing for me. And plus, by the way, the final reason is I grew up in Virginia. Like it was easy for me to go. It's an hour from my parents' house.
Yeah.
I know Richmond pretty well. I went to college 45 minutes from Richmond at University of Virginia. So like it was the easiest bet to
So
take.
how bad did you want to work at Martin Agency all this time?
I really liked the Martin Agency. I remember being there and I thought I would stay in Richmond after I finished. So I connected really hard with some of the people there. But I ended up going to Minneapolis.
Was that your golden goose?
No, it was it ended up being Fallon was the golden goose, but
that's a good golden goose too. But why? All right, let's get into your break-in now.
Yeah.
So you did VCU, you developed a great portfolio, you got your master's degree, you were able to pay this on your own, maybe, I don't know, but you had skin in the game. You want to prove your parents that you could do this and you made the right choice because you made a big career switch, right?
Yeah.
So what happens after that? You worked your tail off, and I'm sure Kaylee Cantrell gave you a shout out to some people that reached out. What happened? What happens after that?
Yeah, and actually, so between my first and second year, I went to a small brand consultancy to intern called Zeus Jones, and the reason I did that was because I just thought that coming from the finance world, it would be easier to break into a consultancy. Like there was a little bit more business skill that I could apply there, but I didn't like my experience, not because of Zeus Jones. Great people, really smart people. I just really wanted to be closer to creative. And so I thought a creative agency was the right thing.
A brand consultancy shop. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So what do? They just do brand architecture, tell you how to position, a little bit like strategy, front end, where you're at, diagnosis, and then tell you to F off.
Kind of, yeah. And the clients are like, the client is usually not a CMO. It's actually like, sometimes it's a CEO. I worked with like the head of licensing once at General Mills. We worked with product people. So it was taking a brand lens on like everything that an organization does that faces consumers most of the time, but they did some B2B stuff too. But it was, if your thing is something that an end user or consumer or customer will interact with, then there needs to be a brand lens to it. So licensing, for example, it's like General Mills has a lot of IP. How do you combine that with other things to make interesting stuff? For example, like a cereal brand combining with a fashion brand, right? So they wanted an approach to licensing that would help them just unlock revenue.
I like that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I just didn't see it for me.
But you did this strategically, right? Because you knew that you came from the finance background with the masters and like that rotational thing you did in Europe. You knew that your background with economy and finance would get you a step closer to your agency break-in, which is really smart because you probably had a lot of self-awareness, or maybe it's hindsight bias and looking back and you're connecting the dots now, but it made sense. You got a step closer, right?
Yeah.
Your way. You didn't try to make the big leap to your golden goose. You weren't going to Fallon just yet.
Yeah.
You interned strategically and you learned a lot, I'm sure. And you learned what you loved and what you didn't love. And that got you on paper. It looked better. Your narrative, your story just got better.
100%. It definitely helped me break into eventually Fallon, which was just a really good experience. And it was one of the things where that networking piece really helped because, again, I was sending a lot of emails. Like I wasn't only looking to work there, but it was definitely my preference. And eventually my choice was between 2 agencies, and I chose Fallon because it was just for me, like the number one thing of what I looked for was who my boss is going to be at a job. And that person and I just had we clearly bonded quicker. I just saw something where I felt like I could grow a lot more under that person. And it was a good decision in hindsight too.
So let me, so you interned at this consultancy, Zeus Jones, cool name. And then you went back, I don't know, for another year, school year at VCU Brand Center.
Mm-hmm.
You then graduated, you got your master's in strategy, creative strategy. You had a great portfolio, I'm assuming, online.
Decent, not the best one in the class, I'll tell you that.
That's okay. I mean, that's also too, it's like, I'm sure it's very competitive. I don't know how the nature of the game works over there. Collaborative, competitive a little bit, probably
a little bit of both.
Yeah. And everybody's like trying to looking around who got hired and where they got hired at and who was the last one. Is there a little bit of that game to it?
100%. There's definitely the how did that person get that? And again, it kind of for me was like proof that networking mattered more, because while everyone was taking their portfolio down to the last 3 weeks of school, I had mine done in February and I just started sending it out. It's like, I'm just going to get in front of as many names as possible. It's not a perfect portfolio, but it showcases who I am. And I believe I'm a pretty good interviewer. And so I was like, as long as I can get my foot in the door, I know I'm going to like push my way into
especially strategy, right? Like strategy is all about your way of thinking and that's tested through a conversation, I believe, and scenarios and, getting to know you. So that makes 100%. A lot of sense too. Okay. So you started early. That's another good lesson there. Like it doesn't have to be perfect for you to send it out. And you can always let people know that it's like 80% done, 90% done, or it's in a good enough spot for you to look at, right?
Yeah. And, there were a couple where I was like, hey, I'm working on this brief now. Let's talk about this thing that I'm like work in progress on. And here's half the brief. And here's what I'm thinking about. I remember there was one project I was working on, threw it in, and it was incomplete. I was like, I'm sort of waffling between a few thoughts. And I talked to a strategy director and I said, this is what I'm thinking about. And he actually guided me right in that interview. I didn't take the job. I got it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to sort of use this to develop it even further.
You did that in an interview?
Yeah, because they asked, walk us through something you're working on or you've worked on.
What agency was that?
I can't even, I think it was McKinney, but don't quote me on that because I was talking to a couple places. But I just remember talking about Progresso, and it was this like project I was struggling with. And I was like, I'm thinking about this or I'm thinking about this. And
and that's your thought process. That's smart.
Yeah.
And you got the offer there too.
Yeah, I ended up not taking it because Fallon was the thing I wanted. But it was really fun it was really, because the thing is, and even now I know this, and my boss says this to me all the time. He says strategy's never done. Even if you briefed, you could possibly improve it, provide more value to creatives, have more fun doing it. And I remember I would get my portfolio out, and then the next week I would change it. It's not like it mattered. If I changed it the next week, it didn't have to be perfect, and it didn't have to be the same as when someone saw it previously.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a portfolio is constantly updated. Strategy when you're in an agency should be constantly checked on, tweaked as well.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I'm always doing it. Like
I'm not a strategy.
Even last week, we already have sold in a creative idea for one of our clients, and we're a week out from production. So it's just little nitpicky things. And one of our creatives said, I have a thought on how to rewrite your strategy to help sell in this one thing we're working on. And I was like, I hope it's not the whole thing. Well, it in. He said, no, it's just, there's something about it that can help us better, use your strategy as a filter for our work. And I was like, great. So then he helped me rewrite it, and I sent it to the team, and they were like, oh, this helps us better go. This idea is working. This line is working. These words are working a little bit better. Sure. And so for me, it's never done because of that.
That's a little complicated for me to understand at this moment in my brain functioning power, but My listeners are probably a lot smarter than I am, so I'm sure they'll understand.
That's funny.
All right, let's hear Mojo Supermarket. So you broke into Fallon, dream agency, or that was your golden goose. What was it like working there? Was it everything you dreamt of? And then give me high points of the rest of your career, and we'll get to Mojo.
Yeah, so I was there for 4 years. What I had in Fallon, I started as an intern, and actually I started as an analytics intern. That was another foot in the door.
What?
But I told it was within the strategy department. So
Right.
the head of strategy was my boss. And
did you turn down a full-time offer from XYZ agency?
No. The other place was an internship too. It was internship.
Crazy that you had to do an internship after 2 years of additional school. You have 2 masters.
Sometimes you got to take the opportunity. Like it. First of all, it was one of those things where like there was a big chance a job was at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't guaranteed by any means.
You can read the signs in the room. And what were those? Like, were they mentioned that we're looking to hire somebody at the end of this, or did they say it explicitly, or how did you know?
It was one of those things where it was, since it was an analytics intern, there was an investment in building an analytics department. So I was actually the second person in the whole department. They had just built it. So I thought that was a good thing. They're not going to cut this after 3 months. I hope not. Yeah. And it was, they talked me through all the new business they had. And I just, part of it's a risk too. Like it wasn't guaranteed by any means, but I just felt good about it. And I thought worst case scenario, like I'll just start making phone calls to the other places that I'd already been talking to.
Right. And it worked out.
Yeah.
How long did you intern for?
Interned for 3 months. I took a full-time role as actually a strategist and analytics person. So I kind of was like, hey, I don't want to just be an analytics person. I know that's the need right now, but make me a planner too. And I'll kind of toe the line between both. One project might be as a planner. One project might be as a data analyst. And I kind of did both for a while. But I think the most important thing was over that time, I just had a really good boss who saw a lot of potential in me and helped me unlock a lot of the things in myself that I did. Like I would get to obstacles and not know how to get over them. And she just understood how me as a person and as a professional, like she saw how I could grow and sort of push me to do so along the way. She did that in 2 ways. One was kind of by giving me chances. She would put me in rooms I didn't know I was ready for, but she knew I was ready for. And just by being tough on me, like I didn't always know what I could do, what my abilities were. And she set the bar high and helped me get over that bar.
Who is this person?
Juliana Simon. She's now no longer at Fallon. She's at Callan, funny enough.
Yep.
I think I sent you her name. She's awesome. She's one of the smartest people ever. She reads a book a day, I think on average. And she just was a really good mentor to me.
Shout out.
She's great.
I'd like to hear. What about after that? What else happens in your career?
So when I left Fallon, I went to, it was actually because I moved to New York. My girlfriend became my wife, and she got a residency in Brooklyn. And so it was time to move over there. And I moved to Johannes Leonardo for a bit. I wasn't a fit there personally, in my opinion. So it was kind of for me a little bit of like, I had this great experience at Fallon. I didn't know what else was out there, and I kind of had to make my way through it. And then I stayed there for about 10 months. And then I moved over to Mojo Supermarket because A, it was a promotion, like it was going from a senior strategist to a strategy director. But B, I just felt like it wasn't the place for me, and it wasn't personal about anyone whatsoever. They're a great agency. I liked all the people as individuals, but I just needed an environment that was a little bit different for me.
Nothing wrong with that, right? And when you know, it's when you know, it's time to go.
100%.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't burn any bridges and you got another promotion out of it. Yeah. You don't want to be doing that, every career, but every.
Yeah, no, you don't want to do it all the time. But I've been here at Mojo for 2 years, so it's been a pretty good experience since.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and especially because Mojo's only like 4 years old or 5 years old.
There you go. And you worked on looking at your media here. There's some hockey in you. What's that?
That was fun.
Yeah. Breath of Stress Air, the anti-vaping one. I've seen that everywhere. That's great.
Yeah, we just won the Grand Effie for that last.
That was a huge deal.
Yeah, man, that was good. The Truth Initiative is a major client for us, and just such a good relationship. And they trusted us since the beginning, because we told them not to only be an anti-vape brand, but actually be a pro mental health brand. And they took a leap of faith with us, because before that, a lot of the work they did was kind of right on the nose with the harms and dangers of vaping, and before that, cigarettes. And we told them that because we found, and I think they shared this with us, we just used the data in an interesting way, where um, we found that amongst all the issues that Gen Z cares about, and they cared about teenagers and young people, because teen vaping had gone up from 3% in like 2018 to 25% of teens were vaping in 2020 or 2021. And they didn't care about it. It was like 14th among the list of 15 issues that Gen Z cared about in public health. And number one was mental health issues amongst their generation. And so we were like, is there any science that we can legally use to connect the two? And we did, and it's been a really important campaign, because we've helped young people realize that vaping can potentially make their feelings of depression and anxiety and stress worse. And we did that first through creating a fake company called the Depression Stick, which acted like a company that went out and like marketed depression. They were like, we're selling depression through this product.
I remember. I'm that generation. I remember getting targeted for that.
I'm glad you saw it. But then then we like sort of phased it out, and we went from talking about depression to stress. And we made this campaign called Vaping It's a Breath of Stress Air. And we created this fake meditation routine that started off with take a deep breath in, and then it kind of stressed you out through the whole ad. And so it was good. And we ended up winning, it was literally last week, I think, a grand Effie for that work, because we just saw such a big impact of that work on trying to get young people to not vape.
That's like one of the biggest awards. It's one of the hardest awards to get.
It's also just the most planary award. It's so fun, but it's an effectiveness award, which is
that's what
I
your
think
job
just slightly less subjective than the other ones.
I love it. Congrats. That's huge.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
How can well, before I wrap this up, Mojo, what else is the culture like there? How many people, current clients can you talk about? Usually we lead off with this, but we're gonna end off with Mojo, because I know we can talk forever, but give us the rundown. Would you recommend people look into it? You said there's not a lot of juniors, so probably not at the moment, but start networking now. Any internships at the moment? What are you guys looking at right now?
Not at the moment. We don't always do like a seasonal internship. We'll try to bring a strategist or two on whenever we need somebody. And even if that's part-time, you're in school, like that's okay. The agency's great. We're really small. We're maybe about 40 people. Don't quote me on that number, but we're a small but mighty agency, I would say, where we've got a really great team of people who, what I like about Mojo is that the bar is pretty high on the work. Mo and Jono and Ryan and Nichelle and the rest of and Eric, our leadership team, they do a really good job of just keeping us, like, pushing everybody around them to be better. And I think what it's led to is a culture of growth, culture of like honesty. I've been at like companies, not just agencies, where like it's hard to give direct feedback because people take it personally. And I have found that our leadership team has created this culture of like, hey, it's about the work. It's not about you. And even though it always should be, it's not always taken that way. I've noticed. And so I think we've just done a really good job of building that. And we've got great clients like the Truth Initiative. We work with Meta brands quite often. We've worked with TNT and Bleacher Report. We've done a lot of projects with Savage X Fenty. We just started working with Death Wish Coffee. So we've got a great roster of clients and people that we work with. And we try to always work with clients that we feel like have ambitions that are as big as ours. And what it does is it always pushes, it makes every feedback meeting, every briefing, whatever, just a lot more conversational and even it allows room for disagreement and like pushing each other. We've had moments where we've told our clients, hey, I don't know if this brief is working. Like, can we talk it through and figure out how to make your brief better to us? And that leads to them being like, hey, this isn't working for us. Here's direct ways that we can improve it. And it never is taken personally. It's always in the spirit of like aligned goals, because we all want to make good work.
Easier said than done, right? It sounds like that's the expectation at all advertising. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. So if that's true, and I believe you, and you can maintain that, that's the dream. So,
well, no agency is perfect. You gotta, there's always like, because it's still people who are at the heart of this, right? And people have emotions. People have different incentives, and people have lives.
People are rational either.
Nice callback. We love a good callback.
Love a good callback. I agree. And I think that's all we got. I think we're going to leave it there because we left. I know there's a lot more, but I want people to reach out to you directly.
Yeah, man.
How could they do that? Is that legal?
Yes, it is. I can send you my email. It's my first name at mojosuper.market. Feel free to just email me there. I'm an open book. I'm not always the quickest responder, but I'm an open book.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much. You were fantastic. This has been
Thanks,
great.
Gino.
I can't wait for people to reach out and see what Mojo does in the future.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time.
Have a good one.
Thanks, man.